adjust that microphone. And what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Sharpest Tool. I'm your host, JRP, along with the infamous, or I guess I should say the now famous Nicholas Bosco.
What's up?
There we go. You're probably recognizing some really kind of, if you're watching this on video, we got some crazy shirts going on. Not typical. I mean, for some people, it's a typical Friday, right?
But why is that?
For
why
Bosco,
are we wearing these shirts?
They're pretty slick. little fun environment for this particular episode, because this episode, I don't know if you know this, Bosco, this episode marks the 100th episode that we have been doing this podcast, which is nuts. Like, hold on, let's get that. Where's the cheering thing or the clapping? Like, this is
there. It is. Yeah.
Slow. Yep. I know.
Going,
a lot of fun going on in here. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to look back and see all the conversations that have been had, see all the people that have reached out in light of the podcast. It's always fun to talk to a client at a conference and they're like, oh yeah, I totally listened to the podcast and I learned so much from it. Just warms my heart.
So, Josh, like, you know what? Thinking with that in mind, Josh, I was thinking about this. You've done this since the beginning.
Yeah.
What is it? What do you feel you've taken away from this, or what have you learned, whether it's about our clients, about marketing, just over the course of the time of doing this podcast in general? And again, you're a staple within Scorpion as it is. So I'm curious from your perspective, like what you've learned over the course of this time.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Wasn't prepared for that one. I've learned, I really wasn't. Way to throw a winger, Bosco. First off, we've gone through different evolutions of the podcast. When we started with this idea that we wanted to get Scorpion's perspective out in the space, be able to talk about how we discuss marketing, our perspective and vantage points on marketing, back it in with some data to be able to show how Scorpion just does things and does things a little bit differently from other agencies. And so that was what started and evolved into how awesome our clients are. And we brought on so many clients and talked to them, and clients who weren't even clients or businesses that weren't even clients, to get their perspective now on, okay, Scorpion's perspective here on the one hand, and on the other hand, how are business owners deploying that? And I have found that when I've interviewed, whether it's internal people, or our clients, I learned so much. And I've learned not just different ways that businesses approach particular problems and challenges, but I also learned how similar some of those challenges are across the business owners. Doesn't take talking to many business owners very long to find out just how similar some of the challenges are, which is actually really comforting running a business for home services, specifically with digital marketing in mind, because they're a very clear roadmap in terms of how a business gets from point A to point B starts to emerge. And a lot of businesses are after the same thing. They're after growth, or they're after that, acquisition that they want to sell the business at some point, or they want to add trucks. I mean, a lot of the problems are pretty consistent. And the way you go attack those problems is pretty streamlined, pretty consistent as well. So I think I've just learned how similar a lot of businesses are, and just how awesome this industry is. The home services industry really is. You work with some amazing business owners, some amazing people, and we get to work with them every day, Bosco. So as a listener, though, from your vantage point, what are some of the things that you've learned? Like, you've heard the podcast circulated, you've talked about it with clients. Like, what are some takeaways that you've had being the 100th episode in?
I'm just blown away that it is the 100th episode. This is amazing. 100 episodes in. Like, congrats to you, man. That's a lot of legwork on your part, man. Great job. Great job to the team, too, supporting it. So thank you to everybody that's been supporting this.
I could not do this without the team internally here at Scorpion supporting it. They are the real champions. I just get on here and talk probably more than I should. But the team behind us, absolutely. But anyways, continue. What are your takeaways from it?
So I remember doing one episode with you, and it was about branding. And I just remember having clients talk about that episode, the ones that were talking to you, like, hey, I heard that podcast you were on. Now, not even with me on it, but just others in general. I've had a lot of feedback from even internal account management teams, fulfillment team members, and some clients that were saying they've learned just different nuggets that they've picked up across the way. Because again, with marketing, there's just so much involved. It's just an ever-evolving area that we are always going to be talking about. And no matter what, tomorrow something's going to be rolling out that's completely new, whether a company has innovated something, whether Google is saying, here's our latest and greatest update. It doesn't matter. It's always changing, always evolving. And it's because we're adapting to the demographic that's out there. But with us and others in the previous of what you've done, I've always heard the feedback being that they loved it because it was something that they can listen to over and over again on repeat and still find something new and different.
Yeah.
And I will say a lot of people just melt at that JRP voice. They're just going to melt with that one.
Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind. The good old, the deep, dark, mysterious JRP voice. It's funny that you say that too, because first of all, if you're not getting value from these, then please let me know, because these are all intended to be value adds, to give different perspective, different ways of doing business. Whenever I read a book or listen to a podcast, I always think about what's the one thing. You don't have to have 10 things. You have to have one. If there's one thing that you take away that makes you go back into your business and do something different, then it was an effective episode, or it was an effective podcast, or an effective topic, or an effective book. And so always thinking with that in mind. And for me, I love growth mindsets, and I love people that have growth mindsets. I love talking with business owners that have growth mindsets. And the things that feed me the most, not just intellectually, not just business-wise, but just personally, are the things that provide enough value where I can take one thing away that I know I got to go execute on because it's going to transform the business. And I have seen time and time again, talking with business owners and talking with internal people, there's always something. There's always something when you're open to it. Even if you think you have everything dialed in, there's always one angle that you could think about differently. And that's why we provide so many angles on here, different ways to think about things, because marketing is not black and white. It is filled with the beautiful nuance of all of the marketing stuff that we have to deal with day in and day out, the constantly evolving landscape. And so it's so important to keep that in mind.
I want to hit on that too. And these episodes and even the previous ones are not just about marketing. It's exactly what JRP over here was sitting on, which, by the way, we got to talk about that. But it's essentially how a business can evolve itself. And I want to point something out. My son, who is now 11, it was about 3 years ago, he actually was in class and he created this, and I thought it was amazing. I have a growth mindset. Okay, this is perfect. It fits in. So what are some of the things?
Even my son knows lying this. In front of you.
I keep it as a reminder. I keep it as a reminder for myself because I'm telling you, I have learned the beautiful thing about my son, and for anybody out there that's a parent knows this. Children don't have a filter because they're not born with necessarily filter. They're curious. They want to know what's going on, right? And so he gives me true and honest feedback about things.
Yeah.
And I love that because it helps me adapt to, okay, how do I understand him? How do I maybe land something differently? Just like in business, just like in marketing, we have to articulate things a certain way. Does it have to land differently? But this was awesome. I do have it here, and it talks about a growth mindset. And it's, for example, some of the attributes of a growth mindset. I should try a different strategy. Correct. I will ask my friend for help. Great. Talk to peers, talk to other business owners, right? I am working really hard to learn this, right? So this is from my son. Here's a fixed mindset. We steer away from this 100%. I can't do it. Get that out of there. As a business owner, don't say that. You've got to think differently, even in the marketing digital world, okay? I give up. Don't ever give up. It is going to be daunting. But yes, my son created this. I keep it next to me as a constant reminder.
That.
This is
it
right here.
That was right in front of you for this particular episode.
I got this.
Who could have planned that? We definitely did not plan that. I did not expect that. That is amazing. That is amazing. What I love about that, the I can't do it mindset, I always think about it this way. And I'll never forget some feedback somebody gave me. They just appreciated, apparently I made this in a comment, and it resonated so much. So I'm going to say here, and that is like, yeah, that thing seems impossible, but if it wasn't, how would I do it? And what's interesting is I always talk about this. Our brains are problem-solving machines. You give it a problem, all it wants to do is give you an answer. So the questions you ask yourself when you're going down this path of like trying to get better or make the business better and that sort of thing, the questions you ask yourself are just as important as the answers that you're trying to get, right? Because if you're asking the wrong questions, if you say, I can't do this, guess what your mind's going to do? It's going to fill your brain with all the supporting detail about why, you're right, you can't do it, right? That was what is it, Henry Ford? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
You think you can.
Right? And that's what stems from this. Versus if you say, you know what, this seems impossible, but if it wasn't, how would I do it? How would I do it? I haven't nailed this before, but how would I do it if I could do it today? And what would I do differently? Guess what your brain's going to do? It's going to fill with all the data and all the supporting details around how you can do it. differently, even though you haven't done it before, right? And all the different ideas start spawning in your head. And marketing is so much like that. It's like, yeah, this seems like an impossible problem, but what data do I have that can help me solve it? And what would I do differently knowing that data is at play? That's what we deal with day in and day out with strategy, right? Whenever we're going down trying to develop a marketing strategy for a particular objective for a business, what's the data that we have at our disposal? What's the data we need? How do we bridge the gap? And then let's build a strategy around it and go deploy it to be able to achieve some specific outcome and objective, right? Simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. And business owners out there, again, this is just a constant reminder. You need to build that consistency even for yourself internally, right? We talked about consistency before in marketing, but it's also consistency in the mindset. So, again, when it comes to the strategy aspect, which I think is a great segue into what we're going to be talking about here, you've got to operate with the right mindset, the right tools, and the right information to make the right decisions, right? It's never a one size fits all, but you've got to work to make this work. You've got to work to make this work.
I like that. You got to work to make this work. You heard it from Bosco. Bosco signing up. You got to work to make it work.
Got to work to make it work.
I love that. Awesome. And well, anything before we jump into this? I know we spent a little time just reminiscing. Hopefully, I think there's still so much meat in a lot of those. Mindset is everything when it comes to being a successful business owner, when it comes to being a successful account manager, really at our company, a successful scorpion. Growth mindsets are what unlock successful scorpions on our team. And so, but as business owners, we got to think about that as well, right? Mindset determines that reality. And in the measure that we're not constantly evolving our mindset, we're not constantly feeding ourselves, we're going to fail. We're going to stay stagnant. And stagnation is not equivalent to growth. It's not how we unlock growth. Especially 10x growth, like some clients have.
I got to think of something there with stagnation now. My mind's working, so. Yeah. But yeah, go for it, Josh. Sorry.
Okay, we're going to jump in. We've been talking about paid advertising in this segment. We talked about on the past 2 episodes, we were talking about how we maximize paid advertising, what paid advertising is, how do we want to think about paid advertising for business growth. But there really is always a strategy, and we've been talking about this a lot internally. We build technology around strategy when it comes to paid advertising. And so cracking the code on digital marketing, specifically around what type of strategy insights, how do we take strategy and make it something tangible based on the business goals and objectives? There's a whole narrative there. There's a whole story there about how we go about doing that. And a lot of it starts with our customers' information. We got to understand, first off, align ourselves to the goal. We're in the middle of 2024 goal planning with our clients right now, right? And so the entire purpose we do this, the entire reason we do this is to make sure we're fundamentally aligned with the current state. We know exactly where the current state is, and we know exactly where the future desired state is as we move into the next year. You set targets on an annual basis. You break them down quarterly. You check in with them quarterly. How are we progressing? What's changed? Because guess what? Goals change. And every single time a goal changes, it potentially is going to change your marketing strategy. I dive in with clients who haven't adjusted anything with their marketing strategy for 5 years. And the first question is, have you been stagnant for 5 years, or have you grown? Or have your growth goals been there? And have you achieved them, right? Because if you have growth goals for 5 years and you don't change anything about your marketing, you're missing out on opportunity. You're leaving dollars on the table that could potentially be had. So constantly
there was a business.
Yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but there was a business, to your point, that didn't change their strategy. And they were hitting $1 million for about 12 years straight.
Yeah.
And finally, when they came over, they were asking the question of like, well, what do we need to do different? And that was exactly it. It was like, well, what have you been doing previously? Well, this is all we've been doing. We haven't really thought differently about it. Okay. They didn't have a growth mindset.
Yeah.
Right. They didn't really have a goal to go after. They didn't really think about it that way. They were just like, well, we're just kind of going for it in general and hoping for the best. Well, hoping for the best gave them 1 million over the course of 12 years or every year thereafter. Yeah. So all of a sudden, when we readjusted their strategy, we had a conversation. Yeah. Within 2 years of working with them, they're getting ready to hit 7.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's incredible.
That's it. It's all it took.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting?
Readjustment.
Is you get if you break down paid advertising, a lot of people think, you know, well, it's about quality score and click cost and, you know, the particular when was the last time we talked about that? And I don't say that as if we don't care about that. That is absolutely something that's part of the metrics, but it fundamentally doesn't move the needle in a big way. the way some other data points, if you back out setting up a strong strategy for a paid advertising campaign at its core, what would you say, Bosco? I'm going to float this question to you. What would you say is the most important things that you want to make sure you have a clear handle on to set up a paid advertising campaign effectively?
There's going to be a few factors that I'm going to take in consideration with a business. First of all, we want to know where you're located, right? We take in consideration of the market, right? I talked to a client recently about the TAM, or total addressable market, within the area, right? In a given area. Now, there are some businesses out there. I get it. You are in an area that doesn't have a very big population, right? You don't have a lot of competition. So that's going to change how the strategy is taken into approach. Or you're going to be in the LA market, right? Houston Metro, right? We can keep going to all these larger populations, over 1 million people. Well, guess what? Your competition is going to be a lot more aggressive, right? So there's going to be, in terms of what we're going to be going after and targeting. Now, we have to first factor in what's going to be your budget, right? What are you comfortable with in spending that you can actually go after this target? Because we know when we operate with data, we know that there's certain things that we can take into consideration, right? So for example, an average cost per lead, here's what we could potentially expect with that. But we know it doesn't stay perfect. We know there's going to be ebbs and flows with your CPL, right? And that's kind of our measurement that we talk about. So going back a little bit, we look at the population in general, right? Now, for new businesses that are starting in a pretty dense population, you're going to be paying a little bit more. Why? Because you're going against people that are well branded. So from first and foremost, we start looking at the population or geo that you're in. Now, if you've been in business for a while, great. And then key factor here is if you've been in business for a while, one thing we're going to be asking from you is going to be a retained client list, right? It's very key that we get that as well. You're going to be hearing that from us time and time again about a retained client list. There's a purpose for it. We need to know, first and foremost, where your clients are coming from. Why? Because if we can keep hitting those areas with your business advertisement, okay, there's a greater chance that we've seen with data to support that you pay a lower cost on the lead, as well as you have better conversion because you're more recognized, right? So what you're doing is you're building up your market within the TAM area, or total addressable market. So you're building up your business from there. So first and foremost, we're going to look at your geo. We're going to try to understand what your budget is and give you a recommendation based on the desired goals you're going after and the needs that you need to hit, right? And there's going to be some adjustment that needs to be made.
Yeah. So if you break it back, you peel it back to those goals, right? It starts there, and everything you said flows from that. That's one of the reasons, again, it's never too late to still establish an annual goal, though. Even if you're in January, February, March of 2024, put that goal together. In the following year, put that
pen to paper.
Pen to paper. If it ain't written, it ain't strategic, as one of my wonderful trainers has said over the years. If it ain't written, it ain't strategic. And so shout out to Rory Clark there. But you want to make sure that that goal is written down and math it backwards. If you're at 1.7 million and you're trying to get to 2.5, what's the delta there, right? What's the gap that you're trying to fill? And how are you planning to fill it? Are you adding service lines? Are you adding trucks? Do we just need more from the areas that we're in? Can we get more from the areas that we're in? That's where your marketing partner comes into play to be able to make sure that we're providing the options that are available to us. Now, those options may not always be directly correlated to a 1-for-1 dollar to go get a lead, right? Dollar to go get a lead. Because as we know, not all leads are created equal. You have leads that are high quality, high intent, people who are really looking for your business, and you have people that aren't, right? And those are all going to flow through. So you have to take that into account. But what you really want to start with is that goal. What are we trying to get to? What's our average ticket? How many leads realistically do we need on that average ticket to be able to generate the $2.5 million that we're trying to get to this year, right? That's going to give you a lead count. Then you take that lead count, break it out by month. And then every month, how many leads do you realistically need from all of your sources to be able to hit that? Now, obviously, your conversion rates are going to play into factor here, right? When your CSRs pick up the phone, what's their percentage of those phone calls that are turning into booked appointments? And what percentage of those booked appointments are turning into booked jobs and booked revenue? Those are two super important conversion metrics that you want to be tracking. Because if you don't, you're missing a fundamental lever that you can pull, right?
And that right there, I think you pause for a second and really hit on that. Business owners, for anybody that's listening out there, you have to take that in consideration if you haven't already. You have to remember that there is what we call the 3-point process in terms of what a client is seeing, right? Okay, one factor is going to be your digital marketing, right? The idea is that we get the ads out there. Anybody that you're working with, your ads are out there. So to stop on that point, I really wanted to make sure we got this because it's really crucial. Okay, once the ads are out there, the goal is to get them to call your business. Great. They've called your business. That is step one. It is complete. It is now up to the CSRs to really ensure that they book that call. And in some cases, it could be a price shopper. That happens. Tire kickers, as we call them, right? I've heard that before. I understand it, right? But the CSR is going to work really smart and hard on this part to make sure that they can book that job for the techs to go out. That's number 2. Number 3, tech goes out. Now that's a service check, right? We're coming out to do a service check and then give you an estimate. Okay. The tech's got to work hard to close it and collect that revenue and do the job. That's number 3. So the 2 factors that are very crucial to the success of a business is going to be the CSR and the tech as well. Right. So the three-step process there.
Three-step process, man, so important, right? Because those are all, think of them as 3 levers that you can pull. 3 levers that you can pull to get more calls, but it's not just about getting more calls. I hear this all the time. I just need more calls. I need more calls. And I dig into the business back end, and it's like we can actually not have to spend more money, and we can book more calls by simply changing our process. Again, growth mindset.
Even by 10%. 10%.
I get 100 calls, and even if I'm at 30% of those 100 calls turn into booked appointments, that's 30 calls that are 30 booked appointments, right? There's 70 there. Now, the question often is, again, what do we tell ourselves, right? We can think, I need more calls. And then all we think about is how I need more calls, rather than how would we think about that differently? How do I get that 30% conversion rate to 50? Now you're solving a different business problem that has way more ROI than just simply pouring more money into getting more leads, right? Because it's not always a lead problem. I found that time and time and time again. And the business owners who take those other conversion points seriously, we have businesses that are converting 70 to 75% of those calls, if not more, into booked appointments. Think about that. You have 100 calls coming in a given month. You're at 30% booking rate. That's 30% of those calls. That's 30 booked appointments for your techs to go out on. Change it. Now you're one of the businesses that have 70% booking rate. That's 70%. That's 70 calls out of those 100 that are turning into booked appointments for your technicians to go out on. Holy cow, Batman. Like, that's huge. So that's super important to keep in mind, especially as you're setting up your thing. Now, you mentioned 2 other things that I want to touch on, and we're totally going to have to dovetail this into the next episode.
That's a good thing, though. That is a good thing. That's why we do these podcasts. It's because of this.
They're so good. Now, you mentioned the strategy behind location. There's 2 types of areas that you tackle. There's areas where you do business, and there's areas where you don't. There's areas where you're known, and there's areas where you're not. There's areas where you're known more than other areas where you're not as well known, right? So just picture that contrast. Areas where you're known, right? You go to a party and you know everybody, right?
I like this.
Who's willing to, and Siri is totally catching on to our conversation here. You go to a party and you know everybody. You can go talk to everybody. Yeah. People refer you to everybody, right? You're well known. Like, there's no resistance to people coming up to you.
We call him JRP.
Where, speaking of which, you said you had to say something. You have to remember to say that at the end. I don't know what it was, but so you go to a party where you're well known versus a party where you're not. Party where you're not, you're having to work a lot harder to get people to talk about you and to get you out there, right? So there's 2 different strategies, which we'll talk more about on the next episode. The first one, though, is to make sure your paid advertising strategy is dominating and fully saturating those places where you're well known. Why?
Well known.
It's easier to get jobs. It's cheaper to get jobs there than the areas where you're not as well known. Versus the areas where you're not as well known, you're going to want to send a microphone into that party to let everybody know who you are and what you do and what you're about, so they're primed for that opportunity. So it's a very different advertising strategy that we'll talk about more on the next episode.
And everybody says to me, and when I talk to business owners, they always tell me, well, I service all of this area. I said, I understand that. But when we get that retained client list as an example, right, we start to actually understand how their market is working with their business and working for them, right? All of a sudden we see, for example, we're going to use the area that we're located in currently. For example, Santa Clarita, right? Let's use Santa Clarita as the example. Maybe I'm well known in Santa Clarita, but then I go look at Riverside and I'm not well known over there. But I go, why? I service all the way up from here to Santa Clarita, all the way down to Riverside, because I'm just massive. That's what I want to do. But nobody knows me really in Riverside yet, but I say I service it because I say I service it because I know I can, but it doesn't mean it's the right move to make. You got to make your dollars work for you. You really need to in a business world, right? So that retained client list is going to feed into that. All of a sudden, I'm going to see, wow, Santa Clarita is where all your customers are coming from. Let's start marketing there. And guess what's going to happen, right? Lower cost per lead. In the long run, you're starting to get a better ROI or cost per acquisition.
Yeah. Boom. Bada bing. I need the clap, the clap thing at the end. I'm so bad at this. The little there we go. Yeah. Gotta have that. All right. Rounding out the 100th episode of the Sharpest Tool.
Ooh.
Some fire side chat here. And we got to carry this into the next episode. It's funny. We have this, I'm looking at kind of our plan, and we got some of the plan in there, but then we totally went an awesome direction that we're going to have to carry some of this over into the next episode. So there's definitely some more fire to come. Anything, last comments on the 100th episode here, Bosco?
You need to tell the audience how JRP was formulated. Now, we talked about this on the episode that I was introduced on, that you were going to talk about this. So we've got a few minutes here.
Fair point.
I want to hear, and they want to hear, how did JRP come about? How did it happen?
Okay.
Let's go.
All right, fine. Fair point. I did call that out in the first episode. If you kept listening, you would hear the JRP comment. Okay, so funny story. When I first started at Scorpion over 10 years ago, the fashion statement, mind you. This is not JRP statement. This is fashion statement.
Coming from us wearing the shirts right now.
Was the business casual thing to do was wear red pants. That was like the big thing, right? So when I started working at Scorpion, I had like blue pants, I had green pants, I had red pants, and then you have jeans and everything. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna massage the workforce in with the pants. I'm not going to go straight red. I was like, I'll start with blue. It's close to jeans, and people accepted it, right? And then I was like, okay, I've been here long enough. I think it's time. It's time to break out the red pants. So I wear red pants to work one day, and our CEO calls an all hands for all of the account management team in his office. And the minute I walk in, of course, it's noticed. It's red. They're not blue, right? And so he just shouts, "Joshy Red Pants!" And so it started off as Joshy Red Pants, and then everybody just started Joshy Red Pants. Yeah. And then it became JRP, which got shorthanded to, some people were like JRP for a while, JRP, JRP, but JRP just stuck as the acronym. So if I ever go personally public at some point, JRP will be my stock ticker. But that's the story behind JRP. It's all about red pants, and eventually red pants, you couldn't find them anymore in the stores. They kind of died off as a fashion thing. It was there for like 5 or 6 years and then kind of went away. So kind of a bummer, because the red pants definitely made a statement. But that's where the name came from. JRP.
That's what you're gonna have to do.
Joshy Red. That's where that came from. So there you go. There you have it. Fun fact for the day.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure everyone's appreciative. Now we know JRP, the history of it.
Now you'll know where it is. So if you see me at a conference or anything, you have permission, call me JRP. All right, everybody, I appreciate your time. Thank you for tuning in for this episode of The Sharpest Tool. Wherever you might be listening at, definitely hit the like button, pound that subscribe button like you mean it. And if you have somebody who needs to hear this, you're listening to it, you're like, man, my boss needs to hear it, my business owner needs to hear it, my partner needs to hear it, this business that I'm trying to acquire needs to hear it, whatever it is, share the episode around, share the love. We really appreciate everybody listening, all the support. Until next time, we'll catch you then. Thanks.
See ya.